Hello again, I'm Greg. This is the penultimate section to part 4, the final part, of our journey through modern hermeneutics. We are now set, after examining the social world and the life world, to sort of reach out and try to encounter the world itself, the world which worlds its own ways. I'm going to speak about two concepts: apostasis, which is the sort of rejecting of one's previous beliefs, if you will, and adonation or adonatio, which is the act of uniting. And we're moving from one to the other. So we're rejecting the world which we grew up in, the world of our childhood, and we're coming to know the world as it is and trying to make something of it for ourselves. So, from apostasis to adonation, I'm using those two terms in newly phenomenological senses. The first question, of course, we have to ask then, we know what the social world is, we know what the life world is. What then is the world itself? And in phenomenology, we use the phrase the world as it is to refer at once to the objectivated worldly, that which exists even if we do or will not, as well as to, pending context and argument, the world seen objectively, without my specific personal lens upon it. So it could be the world itself where it's like, okay, yeah, the world's going to carry on after I'm gone, but while I'm still here, I also have at least an opportunity, if not an original disposition, to see the world as objectively as possible. This objectivity is not transcendent of humanity, but rather seeks to access the broader perspective of the species in and through its shared consciousness, the discourses, the institutions, the codes, the credos, all of the stuff that we've already associated with the life world. In this objectivity, we also must let go of our resentment against the world of which we spoke of last time. Our will to life is primordially strong, so forceful as to not discriminate between resentment and ressentiment, the malicious existential envy that Nietzsche explores and Max Scheler makes a patient study of. Okay? Though we can harbor this truly malicious existential envy of youth in lieu of having lost our own. This is probably one of the great scandals of our age as well. The idea that adolescence is still a relatively new concept, new phase of life, and one that more than anything has been exploited by capital as a kind of never-ending consumptive device. This also explains why adolescence seems to be trailing off into one's 20s and 30s, when really it should end in one's late teens. Okay? So, for instance, this drives the lust. This is another aspect of it, another great scandal. The lust behind assaulting young people, still legal in about half the world's nations. This is extraordinary, it's astonishing, but it's also barbarous and revolting. The idea that adults can legally, physically assault young people simply because they're bigger than them or they claim some kind of authority over them. And in half the world, this is still something that, oh, okay, yeah, that's no problem. Yeah, we can just keep doing that. Beat up our own children and do so legally. So there's yet another scandal, and that separates us from the world itself. Okay? So this is part of our ressentiment directed against youth. It is directed ultimately against our own loss of youth. And then, we suffer due to the aging process, something that youth cannot yet know. It just fuels our resentment of them, although this is a projection. And so we inflict artificial suffering upon them, right? We're suffering as we age, getting older, and youth is carefree and appears to bounce back from almost anything. And it is also non-responsible in a way adults have to be responsible. So all of that adds to our sense that, life is not hard enough for youth. We better toughen them up artificially. Okay, it's a disgusting approach. There's nothing good that we can say about it, and it is on us. So here is the first kind of point of declension, even phenomenologically, between the world and our subjective sensibilities, something that we're trying now to overcome through the process of apostasis to adonation. Beyond this, we approach death, perhaps even with some sense of resoluteness, but behind the life phase scene, bitterness is engendered. Even the hackneyed saw, "youth is wasted on the young," could be uttered only by a disconsolate creature. It's really unfair to say that about a life phase that's specific to itself. It's not wasted on anything. It is what it is. Okay? If we say to ourselves that aging is wasted upon the old, we might well think that if we age gracelessly and with less dignity and nobility than we should strive for, and we are striking out against younger people than ourselves, then that too is on us and makes of us, charlatans in a sense, in our own depraved expression of so-called authority over younger people. In fact, youth is not only available to older persons if defined other than physiologically, it is the hallmark of youth to make wondrous the world to the young, and yet not only to them. Okay, you don't have to say that, okay, if I'm no longer young, I am also no longer youthful. Clearly not. It is true, however, that specific instances of wonder can come only once in a single human life. This does not mean that wonder does itself cease, and that's another issue that we have to sort of come to ethically. And so interpreting the meaning of both our alienation and bitterness stemming from what now must be seen as a value-neutral proposition, our very will to life, okay, but apparently and in spite of yet widespread beliefs conjuring an afterlife, specifically the life we the living actually experience, the life that is lived here in the world. Our fourth form of hermeneutics must negotiate as well, a willing turning away from the very world we, in our youth, held to be so captive for us. So we're not just sort of in this apostasis phase, we're not just sort of rejecting the social world as it has been kind of taught to us and the demands that it makes of us as a young person. We're also beginning to understand that the world itself, as lensed through these subjectivities, is something that we can no longer trust. We cannot trust our own perception of the world that has been given to us without our consent. So this interpretive arc begins, as do the others we have thus far outlined within the social world. The entertainment market targets youth, of course. They are the only franchise which has both dispensable income and available time to consume with vicariousness its wares. Everything which is deemed popular is constructed for children or adolescents, and it serves on the side of capital as a mass-marketed socialization and for the production-consumption lifeway the bourgeois mode of production requires in its efforts at reproduction. On the side of production, schooling performs a rehearsal of working. On the side of consumption, recreation presents a certain range of options, none of which are particularly culturally edifying. From the point of view of capital, a sense of vocation can only be useful if it is applied to either the technical or the ephemeral. Both superstructural forms of the socius can generate, oddly, meaningfulness at the individual level, but never meaning at that cultural. The example, of course, is sports. The emotions are quite real in sports. Remember Rory McIlroy's emotions when he finally won the Grand Slam last year at the Masters at Augusta. That is very real, but the stage itself is completely contrived. For the technical sphere, the focus and drive of the acolyte is real, but the results do not ascend to Tyche. Thus, an inversion of the usual hermeneutical arc is afforded to the interpretant when examine the beginning of the turning away from the world itself. Surely this is a clue. Meaningfulness without meaning seems the lot of the modern individual. Never before have we been so thrown back upon ourselves to make life worth dying for. Okay? It's really all on us as individuals in modernity to make that ethic real. Okay? This is the first time in human history, insofar as we know, that has ever been the case. Meaningfulness without meaning. Okay, purposiveness in an individual level without a wider cultural purpose. Of course, this kind of thing can be greatly abused by politicians who might kind of artificially construct these wider purposes, whatever they might be. It might be the engendering of a super race, if you will. It might be manifest destiny. It could be some kind of fate or some kind of mythological, return to some kind of mythological sensibility about one's folk. All of those things, of course, are subject to manipulation, and they can be so because there's a lack, there's an absence of a wider cultural purpose within our own sensibilities. Okay, meaningfulness without meaning as a hallmark of modernity. Okay, this kind of thrownness, where we're kind of thrown back upon ourselves, again, an inversion of the usual thing, almost appears to double back upon the existential arc of Dasein's project. Yes, and this will make more sense as we ourselves dig further into the novel confrontation between a mode of being and a mode of production. Okay, they're very different things. In doing so, we are absolutely not suggesting that other known modes are somehow better or more authentic to Dasein's original ethical proclivity. After all, this is also a modern concept, and ethics can only come into its own when we have a fully individuated personhood who is agentic, if you will, to the action of ethics. Okay? Otherwise, we are still within the bounds of a kind of a morality, okay? However dissolute and however disavowed. Okay, community may be found in any social condition, and for some, solitude is as greatly cherished or necessary to a genuine vacation. Even so, that's vocation, not vacation. Even so, capital presents unique challenges to human existence, both for the person and to the species as a whole. Working to live is the mantra of the social world in this incarnation thereof, and each of us does their part as well as in consuming, as this is a major factor in economic viability. Between production and consumption, there oft seems little else either to do or to contemplate. There is then much gloss, glitz, and glamour associated with the latter in order to balance the general absence of in the former. Yet it is not directly the case that we produce only in order to later consume. One, they are simultaneous functions of any mode of production, even that of the social contractual subsistence system. Two, most persons' efforts at production are unrelated to what they actually consume in return. This must be so in any organic system succeeding that of the social contract. And three, as in some previous modes, many producers cannot then afford, at least immediately, many actual products that's available because of their productive efforts. So Karl Marx, of course, refers to this specific disconnect as alienation from the products of work. It's one of his 4 forms of alienation. Okay? That is, they are placed at a distance from the workers themselves. It was no doubt more the case during Marx's own time than it is for us in our own. It is one of these 4 forms of objective alienation. Remember, subjective alienation is more of a Durkheim thing than Marx talks about it in terms of anomie. But here, that these 4 forms of objective alienation combine to make up what Marx refers to as alienated consciousness. Okay, that said, the more pressing concern is, in fact, on the subjective side, is on the anomic side. Okay? It is of great interest, then, that phenomenology has, in a sense, repeated the identificatory error associated with much of abstract thought, that the objective condition somehow trumps all other experienced and grounded situations. Absolutely not necessarily so there. That's like saying that the life world always wins, right? In the sense that our experience, our lived experience in the social world, counts only for ourselves and doesn't count at all in terms of how we understand anything else. Clearly, this is not correct. We have already commented on the fact that the existential anxiety is not what drives our sensibilities in most life phases. Just so, it is not alienated consciousness which impinges upon us in the day-to-day, but rather the threat of the anomic relations of production, which Durkheim could have also analyzed as purely subjective, though this would have left out how it interfaces with the other divisions of labor, one of them almost historical alone. That is, of mechanical solidarity. It is this threat of anomie in the social world felt by individuals like myself that pushes me toward a turning away from the world itself. Okay? We make the mistake of sort of associating then our feelings about the social world that we're in and our place in it as persons with the idea that the world is somehow a cruel place and an anonymous place and it doesn't care about us at all. Okay? How do we then interpret this presence of an impending and imposing absence? Another thing we note about youth and recall from our own is the ease by which such social relations occur, including those intimate. Shyness and inexperience aside, youth is the phase of life in which most friendships and romances take place. One's first loves, first cliques, first factions, and the like all attest to the seemingly instant camaraderie afforded to the young, and which often contrasts starkly with the painstaking efforts adults make in order to experience the same later in life. Adult dating is referred to as a minefield, which is both a morbid and even an existential comment. Yet we know such an affair is indeed fraught with risk, simply because anyone, especially after a certain age, who is still quote unquote available by this stage in life might well be those whom the social world has itself rejected. Okay, so if you're an adult and you're trying to date, and then the next person that you reach out for, and then they'll just blow you up, just like you've stepped on a mine or something. So these descriptions are quite stark and even morbid. But as adults, many of us certainly have experienced this minefield. Okay, so in broad strokes, even though this might seem ungenerous or even unreasonable, there are always exceptions, but even here, the reasons for a solid or mature person being present in the minefield are themselves damaging to soul and character alike. The loss of a loved one, unexpected or no, or much more commonly, a simple divorce, which is never quite so simple. But even so, many of us have experienced in the warmed-over youthful pursuits and passions which litter the otherwise and supposedly straight-faced adult path. This, too, represents a doubling back upon Dasein's thrownness. We are beings who are not only ahead of ourselves, but also must be so. So anything resembling a regression delays this forward motion and decoys us through its entanglement away from our mortal destiny. This is what we note by way of a phenomenology of these apostatic movements, if you will. But in hermeneutics, we must seek rather the adunatic event, that which unifies unlike qualities, which are not necessarily opposites, but often find themselves in opposition to one another. As Georg Simmel remarks in his final set of essays, I remain the same person, though I have lived different lives. Okay, this is how Simmel sums this kind of contradictory sensibility about life. Okay, we do go through different life phases. We feel like we may even be different persons. But Simmel says, no, we're the same person. We have those memories. They are what we are. But I have become, in some ways, different persons within the same life. So there's a converse to that. I remain the same person, though I've lived different lives. And the converse would be, I have become different persons within the same life. This is no mere semantics, pending our lens, as gaining the ground of the objective or excavated nearby the subjective. The two-sided coin of indefinitudinal being exhibits this very adonation, the coming together of what for each alone is the necessary foil to itself. In this case, my life and my personhood coincide only objectively, but when experienced, I genuinely understand myself to be either a different person with a biography which includes itself in a singular life, or living a different life, but being the same person who does so. Okay. Our bemusement concerning how life and the one who lives it interacts is mirrored in the condition between the social world and the life world. For us, biography could function as the apical term in a personal dialectic, and thus for the objective conditions of the world, history is often seen as the apex. This last decision is made easier due to the world itself being somehow yet aloof and alien to the original confrontation between social world and life world. Then again, both of these worlds are of human manufacture alone, and thus a second, more radical dialectic presents itself. The world itself is then the antithesis to our subjective experience of human existence. Our interpretation must then ask, what would be the Aufhebung of this confrontation, in which all three worlds are already involved? Okay, so if we take social world and life world to be the thesis, and say that this anonymous world itself is somehow the antithesis, it's not of human origin or manufacture, has no human interest, then we're left with, okay, we've got the two bases of the triangle. What would be on the top of that kind of dialectical relationship? If we shrugged away this challenging problem, we might simply insert cosmos or universe in the apical slot and have done. After all, the Earth as manifest of the world itself is just one of no doubt billions of such worlds, not all habitable for our kind of life, but even so, neither stars nor mere satellites. But I will instead suggest that what more profoundly occupies this most abstract of our dialogic dialectics is not another form of world at all, but rather our rejection thereof, our very turning away from the world, is the synthesis of the worldly triangulation. This is at once astonishing, but as well disheartening. Is the only manner by which an adonation of worlds occurs is through a kind of annulment of our relation with any of them. Let us review for a moment. As we age, our youthfulness dissipates, becomes dissolute and disaffected. In turn, we reject the sense that with our loss, with the ensuing absence of youthfulness, another younger than us should yet be afforded its presence. In this, we have rejected not the idea of youthfulness per se, but rather the course of life itself. In rejecting life, we have fashioned the template to do the same for the world. Okay? It is yet more of a puzzle because we know that the world itself is not a being ahead. Assuaging our pause in the face of this fact is the pervasive sense that the life world does itself look backward. This sense is born of the conflation between the necessity for the contents of the life world to mainly be historical, right? They've already been accomplished and they are there before we are there, and that we are more adept at culling our own biography, also objectively, mostly past and thus in the past, by calling it to present attention once again. This would include, of course, our resentment regarding our lost youth. Yet the life world does not forsake its phenomenological moniker. It is a life world precisely because it is living, right? In some instances of social phenomenology, the life world even includes within its ambit the social world and is interpreted as a structural glossary of such. Here, as serious students of this philosophical discourse will have already noted, I have given the two of them some distance, as a way of splitting the positional differences regarding world to be found between transcendental phenomenology and that social. In the one, it is structure alone which is of the essence and thus of analytic interest, but in the second, such structures are themselves creations of this very world phenomenology proper had bracketed out. Yes, they are more influential than our daily doings of the socius as they shape our entire consciousness and thus Weltanschauung, our perceptions of the world. Even so, I do feel that structure is overdone in phenomenology and underdone in social phenomenology. You may or may not agree with me there, but that's how I'm going to sort of frame it here, and hence my more hermeneutic take on it. Given this, the life world is not, in either its function or its presence, a thing of the past alone. In its form, it can appear so, but so can, for that matter, much of the social world, from its institutions, still populated and running as usual, to its spaces, still inhabited and thus used, to its customs and mores, still oft acknowledged and sometimes even celebrated, all by the living. And hence, by the same token, we cannot wave our hands in dustbin dismissal of either. No, the life world and the social world perform an addonative event. They come together, not through their being rooted in history, but through their being experienced by living beings in the present, who then are tasked with coming to terms and then to grips with both the tradition, as we have already seen, and thence their roles in reshaping it or yet overturning portions thereof, if we can. Yes, now this is the clue. We need to clue our way up to another version of the worldly of Hebon. Okay? So this is a bit of an astonishing reversal of logical fortunes, if you will. We're going to now see the apex of this final dialectic in hermeneutics as the rejection of the combination of the antithesis and the thesis. Okay, it's not in some ways an uplifting of the best elements of both or the most consistent elements of both into something new, some kind of gestalt. It is a negative gestalt. Okay? But we'll see in our final part that this is not the end of the story here. So I will welcome you back next time. Thanks again for listening.